With the hero of this story, we will delve into the world of virtual reality and RPG, where life is at stake. Enjoy the viewing. The main character, Rio, at the age of 17, had already gained enough life experience. Despite all the unpleasantness, the guy was hopelessly optimistic. The phone on his desk rang incessantly, but he ignored any sounds for now. He was focused on his thoughts. Rio understood that in his situation, there was little chance of success, but hope fueled his optimism and compelled him to move forward. The only solution he currently held in his hands was a flash drive with a dangerous prohibited game. Only it could bring him a lot of money, which the hero needed. The thing is, the guy had been diagnosed with an incurable disease. His doctor suggested an expensive operation to increase the chances of recovery. The guy knew that the only way to get enough money was to participate in a popular and very dangerous virtual game. Rio wasn't attached to the people around him. He lived in a shelter and was completely alone in this world. However, there was a spark in him and a strong will to live. Another fit of coughing brought the hero's thoughts back to the present moment. The symptoms of his illness indicated that there was very little time left for a successful recovery. Despite the harsh reality, the guy calmly endured the conversation with the doctor. The only moment that surprised him was the cost of the operation. Of course, Rio understood that it couldn't be cheap, but the 3 million won was simply beyond his reach. And that didn't even include additional expenses. The hero remembered the time when he was perfectly healthy. 3 years ago marked the end of his carefree life. Since the day he was diagnosed, the guy had been working tirelessly day and night to earn enough money for treatment. Ironically, Rio now had only 30,000 won to his name, all he could save working as a waiter and unloading trucks. It didn't take a genius to figure out that his savings were just 1% of the required amount, and he couldn't earn more than that in the remaining time. As long as he could remember, the hero had always lived in an orphanage. He had no relatives, received no proper education, and didn't possess outstanding abilities that could help him secure a good-paying job. He learned about the game from conversations with guys like him. They wanted to make quick money and considered selling equipment to virtual reality players. But they were hesitant because the game was too real. Rumors circulated about players dying in the game and the same happening to them in reality. The potential to earn big money was considered a positive aspect, as most players were wealthy due to the high risk, buying everything to survive and minimize damage. After lengthy discussions, the guys were still unsure about participating in such a risky adventure, but our hero already knew the answer regarding his choice. The game was illegal and sold for exorbitant sums, exactly the amount the guy had. For the operation, this money was not enough, but it could be a ticket to a reality where he could earn enough. Regardless, Rio was risking his life, and with this game, he might have a chance. Without hesitation, the hero inserted the flash drive into his goggles and prepared to immerse himself in a new gaming reality where surprises awaited him. The device behaved strangely. Various notifications appeared and disappeared before Rio's eyes. Previously, the guy had immersed himself in the virtual world, but these sensations were completely different. When the stream of notifications ceased, the hero felt fully immersed in the game. Rio felt healthy. It was simultaneously strange and pleasant. The game's AI scanned the guy, creating his character based on the obtained data. Now, Rio had access to information panels with personal data and gaming skills. The main goal in this world was survival. The player had 7 days to save his life and rescue game characters. For this, the hero could receive bonuses. Rio understood the conditions and proceeded to immerse himself in the gaming reality. According to the guy's feelings, the process of transitioning into the game was lengthy. Initially, the hero felt like his body was floating in the air. Suddenly, he was forcefully pulled downward, and the guy fell onto a solid surface. The sensations from this collision were truly realistic. Every centimeter of Ryo's body felt pain. He winced from the pain and the unpleasant smell of something decaying. Right in front of the hero lay a man's body, disfigured by wounds. The stranger's eyes were wide open and seemed to be staring at Ryo, frightening him as if the person was making smacking sounds. Deciding not to linger in the arrival location, the hero looked around. He didn't know what to expect from the game and wanted to find shelter quickly to recover. However, a sudden rise and everything he saw made an indelible impression. Ryo rushed to vomit in the alley, thinking that the sensations were so real that he might vomit on the real table in front of him. To come to his senses, the hero cleared his throat and began to think about what he needed to do first. The meaning of those guys' words on the stairs dawned on the hero. The realism of the game was on a whole new level. Despite all the realism, it was still just a game. And, as in every game, there are standard rules, hints, and a character stats panel here. Ryo opened the command line and studied his data. All the character data were at the lowest level. At this stage, Ryo was worse than cannon fodder since he had neither abilities nor equipment. But, as in any game, you can acquire them by interacting with NPCs. Therefore, the guy picked up a backpack lying near the man. The hero did not expect to get something powerful at this stage. The backpack contained basic supplies, water, some canned food, and a knife. Taking the knife in his hands, Ryo activated its information window. The item was damaged and had weak damage, but it was better than nothing. Inside the backpack, there was also a diary. Alongside the item, characteristics appeared, but they didn't make much sense to him. The hero thought that the diary might contain important information. The author described events that occurred in the game world since the beginning of the war. It turned out that the night was the most dangerous time because any building could become a target for marauders. Also, there was a shortage of food, water, and medicine in the world, so one had to be economical with supplies until it was possible to replenish them. Ryo decided that the safest place in his case would be the sewer, and it was better to get there before it got completely dark. With these thoughts, he packed his loot back into the backpack. Ryo cautiously made his way, looking around for trouble. A way out appeared on his path. Initially, the hero wanted to search for something else useful, but the desire to quickly find a safe place made him hurry. Approaching the door, Ryo heard a girl's voice loudly arguing with someone on the street. He barely managed to step away from the door when a part of it opened, and a stranger burst into the room. Ryo hid behind the nearest wall, hoping to go unnoticed by the unexpected guest. He didn't know if he could trust her. The girl fell to the floor, asking someone, who was still out of Ryo's sight, not to approach her. Suddenly, her face turned towards where Ryo was hiding, and their eyes met. The guy started to get nervous. Meeting someone on the first day wasn't part of his plans. However, the girl didn't reveal the hero and continued talking to the person behind the door. Probably, she was more afraid of that person and saw less harm in Ryo. Ryo was surprised, but when he looked at the man who was following the girl, he understood the seriousness of the situation he had gotten into. This man was a real giant with huge muscles and a crazed look, staring at the girl. In the hands of the brute was a meat cleaver. Ryo realized that the girl needed help, but he couldn't attack such a giant with a broken knife. The risk of losing his life if the man noticed him was too high. Understanding that the man had entered the room and stood with his back to Ryo, the hero decided to trust his luck. But his hands were shaking. A surprise attack could be successful because the giant was completely absorbed in intimidating the girl. Gathering courage, Ryo attacked the man from behind while he was bending over the girl. The opponent noticed him only when he received damage and immediately stepped away from the girl. The unexpected attack was quite weak. the man was going to deal with his offender and continue entertaining himself with the girl. Therefore, Ryo tried to hit him as hard as he could. The giant was not as agile as the young guy, so he decided to step back a few steps and put his knife forward. An alert appeared in front of Ryo, stating that he had performed 3 successful knife attacks, and his skill in handling cold weapons had improved. He mastered the technique of using daggers. Passive effect: increased damage by 10%. Images of instructions on how to use a dagger in action flashed in the guy's mind. The man understood that the guy was still inexperienced and probably held a knife for the first time in his life. This amused the giant. Eliminating the opponent would be easy for him, and he swung his cleaver at Ryo. The hero carefully examined the giant and saw his weak spot. It remained to aim well and hit precisely there. Thanks to his height and build, Ryo managed to slip under the man's arm and inflict maximum damage. The Hulk fell to the floor, raising a cloud of dust, and his cleaver flew aside. Ryo was both surprised and relieved that the first encounter went well. He began to analyze what happened during the fight. It turns out that 3 effective strikes improved the skill. There is a chance of success in this world, but it's hard to say for sure about winning with such skills. The hero's reflections were interrupted by the voice of the stranger. Ryo turned towards the girl, who stood by the exit with the clear intention of escaping from her random helper as soon as possible. Before Ryo could formulate a thought, the girl ran off, leaving all the loot from the brute rightfully to him as the winner. Ryo watched the girl go. She didn't dare to trust her helper, even though she effectively helped him defeat the man. The NPC intelligence in this game was at a sufficiently advanced level. The guy returned to the body of the bruiser to collect the loot. The man looked powerful, and the hero was disappointed when he found only a cleaver and a pack of cigarettes. In this game, NPCs weren't richer than noobs. After taking the loot, Ryo set out to find shelter. He cautiously moved through the streets between houses. The area looked wealthy, so there should be something suitable, sewers or some bunker with provisions. Of course, there could be thugs here, as the hero read in the diary. Rich houses were a real lure for them. Therefore, it was worth thinking carefully before making contact with anyone. Suddenly, the sounds of a fight reached Ryo's hearing. Upon closer inspection, behind a pile of rocks, the guy noticed 2 silhouettes. Initially, he wanted to hide and wait for them to resolve their issues, but if he heard the sounds of a struggle, there was a high probability that someone else would come to the noise. The guy began to retreat slowly, glancing at those who fought behind the rocks. This played a nasty trick on him. Ryo stepped on a dry twig, the crackling of which attracted the attention of the strangers. The girl recognized Ryo and even seemed a bit pleased, at least that's how it appeared to the hero, although he saw no reason for it. Moreover, the guy thought she had gone far from that warehouse. The girl jumped away from the second stranger closer to the guy, and the man cursed. He concluded that he had fallen into a trap, and these 2 wanted to rob him. The girl kept her eyes on the opponent when a shot rang out in the air. Still, their fight attracted the attention of the bandits. The man couldn't escape the sudden attack, and a shot was fired in his direction. Ryo watched as the stranger settled on the ground. He and the girl quickly hid behind the rocks where the guy had previously observed the brawl. 2 bandits approached the man's body, each armed with pistols and bird-shaped armbands. The girl immediately recognized the men. They were members of the Vulture's gang, people you'd better not encounter not only in the dark but in general. The NPC suggested attacking the vultures first. She would try to distract the men, and Ryo should find an opportunity for a successful attack. The girl was confident that they could handle it. She was good at dodging blows, and the guy knew how to handle a knife. Without waiting for Ryo's approval of her plan, the girl rushed towards the bandits. Her initiative angered the guy. He hadn't had time to think through the details, and the men were already heading towards their hiding spot. The hero began to look for a way out of the situation, complicated by the fact that there were two men. When one of them caught up with the rock, the other lagged behind a bit. Ryo noticed that the second bandit got distracted. The first man had come very close to the girl and reached out to her. The hero considered this moment ideal for an attack. All the bandits' attention was focused on the beauty. As Ryo expected, the second man noticed him sooner. Instead of shooting, he shouted at the guy, giving him time to maneuver. He used the bandit as a living shield against the other's attack. The vulture was surprised and approached. Ryo dealt a critical hit to the man who was closer with his dagger, inflicting 100 units of damage. As a result of this attack, the first bandit died. Following that, the hero forcefully pushed him onto the second bandit. In the collision, the second bandit suffered 2 units of damage and was stunned for 1 second. He held the dagger at the ready, taking advantage of the bandit's confusion, and delivered a sudden strike to a vulnerable spot, dealing 98 units of damage. As a result of the attack, the bandit died. The men fell to the ground with a crash, and Ryo lost his balance and fell on top of the bandits. The fight with 2 armed opponents had reduced the hero's health to 20 units, and he felt exhausted. He decided to check the characteristics of the bandits' weapons: 2 pistols and 6 bullets. Not a bad haul, although more bullets would have been preferable. The girl noticed Ryo examining the loot. She approached him to claim her share. The hero agreed to share, considering they had successfully worked together twice. Ryo handed half of the loot to the girl, and she stared at him in surprise. In this world, weapons were in short supply. The girl suggested searching each of the 3 deceased individuals and finding a safe place to divide the loot. Ryo looked at his new acquaintance warily, but he understood that the sounds of gunfire might have attracted someone else's attention, and her suggestion to hide together in a safe place seemed logical. The two made their way between buildings and were almost at their destination when the moon rose above the city. Ryo kept looking back, expecting to see anyone who might be following them, but Colin reassured him. She was always attentive when heading to her hideout. Lifting a hatch in the midst of a pile of rocks, Colin invited Ryo to descend with her. The ladder was quite high, and every movement of the two echoed underground. After overcoming the last step, Ryo glanced around. Colin had brought the hero to an underground storage, a place that seemed quite safe for spending the night. Alone at last, Colin decided to introduce herself to her new acquaintance and inquired if he happened to be a soldier.
My.
Ryo enjoyed the attention from the beauty and was pleased with the introduction. He wasn't a soldier, but in his free time, he practiced martial arts. Offering Ryo some water, Colin realized that her question about special training had unsettled him. To ease the tension, she decided to share some information about the world. While Ryo drank water, he learned about the people one could encounter above ground. Not everyone was bad, each person had both good and bad sides. To express her gratitude to Ryo, Colin generously suggested that he rest in her shelter. It was a generous offer considering the joint effort they put into defeating their adversaries. However, the condition to leave the shelter the next evening put Ryo in a dilemma. He remembered that the most dangerous time in this city was, indeed, the night. The hero woke up with strange sensations, taking a few minutes to realize that he was still in the game. To his right, there were crunching and munching sounds. Ryo noticed Colin, sitting with her back to him, actively eating something. She noticed her new friend, swallowed loudly, and blushed. It seemed that when the girl was embarrassed, she looked cute. Colin quickly realized that she held the last tasty snack. She wasn't planning to share, quickly stuffing the cracker into her mouth and chewing vigorously. So vigorously that she choked, as the biscuit was dry. Rio understood why the girl was nervous. Food and water were invaluable in this world. He handed her a water bottle, stating that he didn't intend to claim her food supply because he had his own. Colin was surprised. Not long ago, Rio shared his weapons with her, and now he offered a whole water bottle. She couldn't decide if Rio was genuinely generous or just naive. The hero took out canned food from his backpack. An alert about his current status popped up. In his current state, he was indeed hungry. The note mentioned that in a hungry state, the character's stamina would decrease by 20%, and it would be consumed twice as fast. When stamina was depleted, it would reduce the health level. On the bright side, he survived the first day. The quest log was updated. There are still 6 days left to survive. This game impressed with its realism. Rio began to eat and asked Colin about the Vulture's gang. Colin provided valuable information. Initially, their leader was an ordinary bandit. When the war started, he was trapped in a police station and somehow acquired weapons, enough to gather a group of similar bandits and escape. The thugs established their headquarters on 6th Avenue. The Vulture was not only strong but also vengeful. He had a gruesome way of killing anyone who opposed him. Thus, he avenged all his enemies, and his gang became the most influential in the city. The hero looked at his companion thoughtfully, realizing that what happened to them would not go unnoticed. Ran was in trouble. Colin corrected him, stating that they were both now hunted by the Vultures. They were surely being targeted this night for elimination. She was curious about how many people Ran could defeat alone. Ran pondered. If a person lacked special training and was unarmed, he could handle 2 or 3. But these guys were undoubtedly armed. The hero suggested ambushing them. Colin hesitated. She still couldn't fully trust the guy. However, Ran was persistent. He didn't want to stay in this underground shelter until exhaustion. But being caught by the Vultures was an even less desirable outcome. Moreover, an excellent plan was forming in the hero's mind. Each Vulture was well equipped. He could gather valuable loot from them for sale or something useful for his progression. Colin admitted that she was good at evasion. If she taught him, Ran could use it to improve traps. The girl possessed an advanced level of evasion techniques and was ready to teach him. An information window with her offer appeared before the hero. Colin's offer surprised Ran. She planned to teach him to evade attacks. Encountering such an NPC early in the game was a stroke of luck for a newbie. The hero gladly agreed. Knife skills were useful, and Ran eagerly anticipated gaining a new skill in the game. An information window appeared before him, describing the evasion skill. Colin was surprised at how quickly her friend mastered the technique. To achieve mastery in evasion typically required 2 or 3 years. She asked if he practiced gymnastics. Ran smirked. He never did gymnastics, but thanks to his interest in martial arts, he was familiar with exercises and figures similar to Colin's techniques. Meanwhile, night fell, and the Vultures went hunting. Their captain, Hook, the most loyal follower of the main bandit, warned the men that their targets were armed, so they should be cautious while pursuing them. The bandits confirmed that they heard the leader's words and spread out. Many believed that the couple was hiding, trembling in fear. Each Vulture was armed and wore body armor to avoid getting killed by a stray bullet in a shootout. Ran observed them from behind the rocks. He noticed that one bandit had strayed far from the group. The hero decided to act and pulled out his knife. Covering the man's mouth with his hand, he attacked from behind. The bandit didn't have time to understand what happened. An information window confirmed the successful attack, and the loot Ran could appropriate glowed green. Ran immediately put on the body armor. Even though all the vultures were armed, they wouldn't likely warn him before shooting. The information window showed that despite such protection, it was still advisable to avoid intentional confrontation with those who wanted to discharge their pistol. The weapon he received was fully loaded. Silently, Ran returned to his vantage point, watching the bandits. The next thug carelessly moved away from the rest. Ran seized the opportunity to incapacitate him. Afterward, Ran hid under a stone from which the new enemy had emerged. He realized that attacking him with a knife now would undoubtedly attract the attention of the other vultures. But Ran had a gun. He had never fired one, and the body armor only covered a part of his body. Ran decided that it sounded like a challenge and he had to learn to use the weapon. A bit further, he spotted another bandit with his back to Ran's cover. This target seemed more suitable for a knife attack. Ran approached quietly, and the man didn't have time to make a sound. An information window appeared before the hero. His evasion skill had upgraded to stealth. Ran carefully studied the information. He had improved the skill after 3 successful attacks. It seemed that for any skill improvement in this game, 3 successful attempts were sufficient. He felt that he had indeed become more agile and inconspicuous to those around him. Attacking under the cover of night would be the best strategy. Ran now resembled a genuine assassin. The game allowed him to experience something he would hardly have felt in real life. The night was very opportune for the hero's new abilities. He eliminated his opponents one by one to avoid causing a commotion among the others. However, the bandits proved not to be so foolish. Their captain almost immediately noticed that some people were missing. He called them by name, but no one responded. This raised suspicions in Hook's mind. The man pulled out his huge pistol and pointed it forward, aiming into emptiness. Something was happening, and he didn't notice. Ran hid a few meters away from the scavenger, who began to panic and look around. The guy realized that he wouldn't be able to pull off his trick again. It was time to use the weapon. He emerged from cover and aimed at the bandit. The man stood a few meters away, but that didn't give the hero any guarantees that he would hit the target. Luck was on Ran's side. He managed to hit the scavenger in the torso, and the guy was thrown back. However, Captain Hook witnessed it all. He immediately identified the source of the gunshot and became alert. The wounded scavenger lay on the ground, the bullet stuck in his bulletproof vest, so the man suffered only minor damage. Swearing, he got up and tried to take cover. Ran realized that his shooting skills were abysmal from the start. The fact that he hit the torso was already great, but he needed to try shooting in the head before the scavenger went too far. However, another bullet pierced the man's knee, and this time it wasn't Ran who fired. Colin shot the scavenger, and the bandit fell to the ground, suffering from excruciating pain in his leg. The girl came to the rescue just in time. Ran made another shot at the bandit. Meanwhile, Captain Hook sneaked behind a nearby boulder to shoot the one who was eliminating his fighters. By the number of shots the guy made and the fact that they were all in vain, Hook realized that his opponent was a rookie who didn't know how to shoot. The man exhaled. With the number of people missing, he considered the opponent a professional. The man decided to use the guy with the mohawk as a shield during the shootout with the hero and successfully avoid direct confrontation. He ordered the scavenger to go ahead and attack the stranger. Ran realized that if he unloaded his gun on the mohawk guy, the second bandit would shoot him. Even if he managed to remain unharmed, the second bandit could still escape to bring more people. The hero remembered that every 3 successful uses of a skill improved its mastery. Now he shot twice and hit the torso. If he shoots there again, his pistol handling technique will improve. Ran emerged from his cover and took another shot at the Mohawk guy. Hook was pleased that his opponent was not just a simpleton. It was more fun to fight someone like him. Ran, on the other hand, got what he wanted, his pistol shooting skill upgraded to gunpowder weapon. Of course, he wasn't a shooting god, but he was much better than a novice. Hook took advantage of the moment when the hero was in plain sight and shot at him, accompanying his actions with a string of curses aimed at the guy. But moral pressure didn't affect Ran. He improved his skill, and now he could definitely hit the opponent in the head. The guy managed to shoot faster than Captain Hook. The bullet reached its target, and Ran could exhale only when the scavenger fell to the ground, and the window confirming 100% damage appeared before his eyes. The guy suddenly realized that after the upgrade, not only his thoughts but also his body's reactions had changed. Now he felt no discomfort holding a gun. On the contrary, it felt like everything was in its place. Before Ran lay the guy with the mohawk, wounded and screaming for the opponent to stay away. But the guy was curious whether the condition of 3 successful attacks would persist after completing this level of the game. After all, it was a pretty good way to achieve mastery. The hero thought he had an excellent chance to improve his hand-to-hand combat with this scavenger, who blamed everything on Captain Hook. Ran swung to test his suspicions. Indeed, 3 hits unlocked the attacking skill barehanded combat. Images of other blows he could inflict on the opponent flashed through the guy's mind, and his body responded with a readiness to precisely reproduce any movement. Colin approached the hero, curious about what the guy was going to do with the captive scavenger. She wasn't cruel, but these bandits didn't leave anyone alive who crossed their path. Ran confirmed her words. He intended to treat the man just like the scavengers were going to treat them. And, of course, gather some valuable information. The hero thought that there was still something to learn from this girl. Colin left, and Ran gripped his knife, eagerly looking at the scavenger. The bandit looked at the guy with fear. Ran didn't look ferocious or insane, but the knife in his hand gleamed dangerously. In an instant, the hero swiftly lowered the knife between the scavenger's fingers. The sound of metal scraping against the ground echoed. The scavenger realized that the situation was more serious than he thought. Ran wanted to know everything about the bandits' hideout. The stranger decided not to hide anything. He already knew very little about the scavenger boss. Only that he was in the hideout. The hideout itself was located in the warehouses of the shopping center. The gang's strength consisted of 20 people. The hero had already heard similar information from Colin. He decided to move on to active actions to make the guy talk. The bandit screamed in pain. He confessed that there were 30 people in the gang, not 20. A few days ago, the boss had recruited other bandits into their group. Upon hearing this, Ran realized that he was not mistaken. The bandit was indeed lying. The hero decided that it was time not to scare but to press the scavenger harder. The man was frightened, and he really said everything he knew. The boss had his channels of interaction with other groups in this city. The blade of the knife gleamed at the bandit's throat. Ran demanded him to tell everything he knew about the capabilities of the scavenger boss. The bandit confessed that their leader collaborated with rebels. He catches women on the streets of the city and delivers them to one of the rebel commanders. This outraged the guy. Ran understood that, in exchange, the scavengers received weapons and supplies. The hero wanted the bandit to tell more about what was happening in their gang, in detail and honestly. But he overdid it with his threats. Rand sadly wiped his knife. The guy hoped he could learn the skill of intimidation or negotiation, but nothing happened. Perhaps there are restrictions on acquiring certain skills at the novice level. Moreover, the bandit had no valuable information. As Colin said, the scavenger was the boss of an NPC bandit group. If he could eliminate him, Rand could get good loot. After all, the more enemies the hero destroys, the more items he can sell. Rand decided to go to the scavenger's hideout. Colin was shocked by her friend's decision. The girl tried to dissuade the guy from this idea. The risks were too great, anyone who wasn't a member of their gang died. The hero had several weighty arguments in favor of his decision to visit the scavenger's hideout. He believed that the bandits wouldn't stop at a single unsuccessful hunt and would send more people to search for him and Colin. And the next squad might be more agile and better armed. Despite the fact that the bandit boss was very dangerous, and the hideout was guarded, they still had no information about the success of the current raid. Attacking their base right now was the best solution. Surprise might help win this encounter. Colin understood that Rand wouldn't listen to her advice, so she promised to wait for him in their shelter. The guy, in turn, headed to the shopping center where the bandits were stationed. Two scavengers stood not far from the entrance. The night was calm, and the red-haired guy suggested his friend take a break for a smoke. His friend feared the boss's anger. Then the red-haired guy pointed upstairs to the building. There was a sniper sitting. In fact, these guys stood below for intimidation. The sniper had a much broader view. He could detect and deal with an unwanted guest long before he got closer to the shopping center. The bandits left their post. They didn't suspect that there was no sniper on top of the building. Rand silently approached and incapacitated the firearm scavenger. The hero liked the weapon he obtained by defeating the sniper. But it was cumbersome and not suitable for the guy's main task for the evening. Moreover, Rand couldn't carry it with him right now. It would raise suspicion if he met any of the bandits. The hero silently jumped down to deal with the guards who went out for a smoke. Despite all his agility, the man sighed when Rand slashed him with his knife. This was enough to attract the attention of the red-haired guy. The man turned around just as the hero jumped forward. The red-haired one noticed Rand but couldn't make a sound. The guy covered his mouth with his hand not to attract the attention of other guards. Having neutralized the opponents, the hero marveled at how well his skills in stealth and cold weapon, dagger, combined. Rand moved cautiously and was surprised that despite the shortage of everything in the city, the scavengers actively used electricity. This meant they were comfortably settled here and certainly weren't afraid of anyone. Suddenly, a man came out of the building door. He was displeased that he was chosen as the perimeter guard again. Rand hid near the wall but was very close to the bandit. The man immediately noticed the guy. Of course, he didn't expect to see a stranger here. So he immediately pointed the weapon in the hero's direction. Rand knew that no one would shoot right away. Most likely, the man would want to talk. Rand raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. He decided to pretend to be a newcomer to the scavenger's ranks. To make the bandit believe him, Rand told him that he was recruited by Delay and already approved by Captain Hook. The man heard familiar names but still looked wary. Usually, recruits were accompanied, and in the case of a personal invitation, Delay should have personally brought the guy to the hideout. Rand shared common knowledge among all scavengers about Captain Hook's task, adding that the guys had already started celebrating a successful hunt. The man was surprised. This argument convinced him that the guy was telling the truth. After all, only gang members knew about the squad's mission. The bandit told the newcomer to follow him. He nonchalantly turned away from the guy, immersed in thoughts about how unfairly his comrades treated him. Ran attacked suddenly. He already knew that the first thing to do was to eliminate any possibility of making noise, so he covered the man's mouth with his hand before eliminating him. Afterward, the hero dragged the bandit's body inside the building not to attract the attention of those who might be outside. The guy went to explore the corridor. Loud music and male voices could be heard behind one of the doors. Ran identified the room as the rest area for the bandits. There were several more doors in the corridor. The hero hoped that one of them would lead to the boss's room. He understood that now, with several scavenger bodies behind him, he should act quickly. At any moment, the bandits could discover the absence of guards or patrols. The hero knocked on one of the doors. He decided to act quickly, but there was no opportunity to find out the exact location of the scavenger. A question came from behind the door, a male voice inquiring who had the courage to disturb him. Ran said that Captain Hook had returned from the mission. The door to the room immediately opened. The man was surprised that a stranger was providing him with information about Hook. Ran gathered courage and boldly replied that the boss always forgets about ordinary matters because Delay had previously introduced Ran as a newcomer. The scavenger pondered. Hook did indeed tell him about a fresh batch of newcomers in the hideout, and the guy could be one of them. He asked Ran about Hook's whereabouts and the couple Hook was supposed to catch. Ran was surprised by his luck. Indeed, behind the door was the boss of the bandits. He told the man the same story that had previously deceived the vigilant guard. The information pleased the scavenger. He decided to reward Hook for the successful hunt and was about to close the door, leaving Ran in the corridor. But the guy prevented him from closing the door. The hero reached his hand through the gap and pushed the door onto the boss. The man was surprised by what was happening. None of the familiar or unfamiliar people had behaved so boldly with him. Everyone in the city either feared the scavenger or respected his authority. Everyone except Ran. The guy used his knife to neutralize the bandit. Because the distance between them was quite large, after being wounded, the man took a few steps back. The hero watched as the scavenger retreated and slumped to the floor. Ran entered and locked the door to the boss's room behind him. An informational window about defeating the opponent appeared in front of the guy. At that moment, Ran heard a muffled moan from the bed. A pretty blonde in short shorts lay on the bed. The girl's hands and legs were tied to the poles, and she had a gag in her mouth.
Oh my!
Ran was surprised by what he saw, but he needed to react quickly if he wanted to escape from this hideout alive. Ran hurried to reassure the stranger. Any extra noise would hinder him from completing the mission. He promised not to harm the girl. On the nightstand to the right of the hero, a phone vibrated. Ran tensed. Someone from the scavenger's inner circle could be calling, and that meant the hero had minimal time for a successful completion of the task. Ran decided to answer the call to understand what he needed to prepare for. The stranger on the other end of the line was irritated and spoke disrespectfully. The man was angry that the scavenger took too long to answer the call. Ran understood that the caller was one of the scavenger's partners. The stranger didn't let the guy say a word. His speech was filled with complaints and demands. Seizing the moment, the hero informed the caller that he was not the person the stranger expected to hear because the scavenger had gone to hell. Ran decided to speak confidently and boldly to the man so that he wouldn't sense his fear and confusion. The man became even angrier. He was one of the officers of the rebels, and even the scavenger considered and flattered him. Yet, some youngster now behaved as if he were in charge. He began to threaten the hero. In response to his threats, Ran laughed. He didn't want to provoke the enemy prematurely, but he couldn't give in to the man's threats. The officer realized that the threat of physical violence didn't scare the impudent guy, so he decided to remind him that he was the one supplying food, water, and weapons to the scavengers gang. Therefore, it would be better to satisfy all the requests he had previously made to the boss. Ran leaned over the scavenger's body to listen to his pulse. The man was dead. Ran decided to find out what exactly they had been negotiating with the officer earlier. The hero had some information, but there was always a chance to get new data. On the other end of the line, the man could be heard smirking. He wanted to get the promised works of art and valuables. They were definitely in the scavenger's room, so his deputy could easily find what he needed. Putting down the receiver, he gave orders to his soldier. The man wanted to figure out what was happening in the scavenger's hideout. If there was a coup and the gang split, they needed to destroy them all and take what belonged to the officer. The soldier listened carefully to the main orders and set off to carry out the task. Meanwhile, Ren was shocked by his audacity. The guy understood that he was not ready to face well-trained soldiers. Analyzing their conversation with the rebel, the meeting could take place today. Also, the hero understood that high risk promised him a good profit in the end. The officer of the rebels was a level above the scavenger. By eliminating the officer, he could raise the level of his character. This game scared with its seriousness because dying here meant losing life in reality. But he wouldn't have a chance in reality if Ran couldn't earn enough money for his treatment here. Returning from his thoughts, the hero remembered the blonde. All this time, the girl had been looking at him. Ran repeated that he wouldn't harm the girl and asked her not to make noise when he freed her. A bunch of bandits was still somewhere nearby. The blonde murmured something incomprehensible. Ran took these sounds as her agreement. He pulled the gag out of her mouth and skillfully freed her from the ropes. The girl looked at her savior with gratitude. During the time she was tied up, the beauty's body had become stiff. While the girl was freeing her legs from the ropes, the hero decided to look around the room. The officer was sure that his order was in the scavenger's possession, so there might be a safe or a hiding place in the room. Next to the bed stood an inconspicuous lingerie cabinet. Ran was greatly surprised to find that the cabinet served as an arsenal. It contained a lot of weapons and ammunition. The hero took a grenade in his hands. An informational window with the characteristics of the ammunition appeared before him. In the corner of the cabinet was a box with valuables. Ran thought that if he could take all this out of here, he would definitely become rich. However, the characteristics indicated that he could only admire them. That's what the hero did, sorting through a string of excellent pearls. Of course, the game creators wouldn't make the tasks too easy for a newcomer. The player who wants to earn will have a difficult path to achieve the goal. Ran took a rifle from the cabinet. The rules of the game must be followed as long as they make sense. The hero turned to the blonde, who was still sitting on the bed and rubbing her swollen limbs. He was going to deal with the remaining members of the gang and warn the beauty about his intentions. The hero tried to move silently along the corridor of the building. Right next to the recreation room was a room with a generator. The hero assumed that this was where the source of light for the shopping center was concentrated. Sounds from the neighboring room made the guy hurry. He entered. The room had a massive generator with 2 levers. In real life, Ren had never dealt with such equipment, but he had seen in movies what needed to be done. Confidently, he placed his hand on the far lever and pulled it all the way down. The room immediately went dark. The hero achieved what he wanted. The bandits would surely panic and want to part ways. From the recreation room, he heard the vultures cursing. Apparently, the generator had malfunctioned not for the first time. The men were angry and sent someone to investigate the breakdown. The blonde was displeased that the choice fell on him, but he didn't argue with the majority's opinion. However, he couldn't leave the room. With a kick, Ran pushed the man back into the room. The bandit fell to the floor with a crash, and Ran tossed a couple of grenades into the room, which he found in their boss's bedroom. The bandits didn't understand what was happening. In the darkness, they only felt their comrade falling onto someone. Ran hid behind a wall when an explosion echoed in the room. It was strong enough. The hero had to cover his ears not to go deaf. The hero returned to the generator to restore electricity to the building. Then, Ran went back to the recreation room where he caused the explosion. He decided to quickly look around. He didn't know if the bandit scouts were still in town. He needed to check fast. After looting the vulture's base, the hero loaded the loot into a cart and hurried to Colin. In the silence of the night, only footsteps could be heard. Behind Ran walked a blonde he saved from the boss. The guy decided to ask her why she didn't leave. He thought their acquaintance would end in the bedroom. However, the stranger followed the hero everywhere. Ran stopped to listen to her. The girl decided to introduce herself. Her name was Maggie. The blonde asked him to take her to the shelter. She immediately explained how she could be useful to the hero. Maggie was a nurse. She could provide assistance, apply bandages, and knew a lot about medicines. The hero realized that this was his chance to learn another skill. Colin managed to teach him her technique, so he could probably work with Maggie in a similar way. He invited the girl to follow him because Ran's plan was to learn as many skills as possible to become stronger. Maggie was delighted that now she would be safe. When the hero entered the shelter, he was greeted by Colin. The girl was surprised that Ran had single-handedly dealt with the vulture gang. It seemed incredible to her. Suddenly, the girl saw a stranger behind her friend. Colin squinted her eyes and asked the guy who he brought to their shelter. Maggie greeted, and Ran introduced her. The hero explained that the girl was held in the bandits' lair, and Maggie, being a nurse, would be useful in their fight against enemies. Colin looked at the blonde with disdain. The girl seemed weak. Colin thought Maggie was intentionally acting this way in front of a man, considering such behavior pathetic. The glances of Colin and Maggie collided, and there was no friendliness in them. Ran understood that a confrontation had begun between the girls, although neither said anything out loud. To distract them, the guy continued to talk about the troubles that awaited them ahead. Colin took her eyes off her new friend. She missed the moment when Ran was talking about the call from one of the rebels. When the hero repeated his story about what happened in the bandits' lair, Colin was shocked. Now she definitely thought her friend was insane. Miraculously avoiding trouble in the bandits' lair, Ran managed to get himself more serious enemies. The best thing that came to her mind was to run and hide somewhere. Colin suggested gathering some things and water to change locations as quickly as possible. Despite their shelter not being in a conspicuous place, the rebels could find them. Ran tried to reassure his friend. He said that the person he talked to wasn't in such a high position to send a whole army of trackers after him. His friend's words didn't calm the girl because the rebels were much more dangerous than the vultures. They had not only weapons but also good military training. Ran took treasures from his backpack, which were in the boss's wardrobe of the bandits. He had a plan that would help everyone get out of trouble. While the guy was telling the girls about his plan, a mobile phone rang on the table. The hero knew it was the rebel who wanted the treasures. Ran declined the call. He realized that reaching a compromise with the officer was impossible. The hero asked his friend to gather him some supplies and water. He wanted to leave the shelter for a few days. Meanwhile, at the rebels' camp, the officer was furious. The man was angered that the guy he threatened didn't take his words seriously. Moreover, he declined his call. The soldier raged and threw everything that came under his hand. He wasn't used to having his orders ignored. The man knew that the guy had collected all the weapons from the vulture's warehouse, plus a bag of treasures and antiques. He was sure that the impudent guy's shelter was somewhere nearby, a maximum of 20 kilometers from the shopping center. Suddenly, the officer's phone rang, and the man stared at the mobile phone in surprise. Before answering the call, he ordered his subordinate to track the opponent's location. Then he answered the call and scolded Ran. He believed that threats were the only effective way to show his significance and capabilities. However, the soldier's words didn't affect the hero. In response to the man's verbal tirade, Ran smirked and asked if he needed more treasures. There was a pause in the soldier's monologue, after which he asked the guy what he meant. Ran decided to go all in. He set a condition for the rebel, the transfer of treasures in exchange for a safe way out of the city. It seemed they had reached an agreement. However, in reality, each of them knew that there would be no simple exchange. Ran pretended to believe the rebel's promise and appointed a meeting with him at the vulture's lair. The hero knew that the officer wasn't simple and would surely trace the call. Deciding that a minute would be enough time for his location to be known, Ran took the battery out of the phone. Some time passed while waiting. Ran decided that the rebels weren't particularly punctual since no one had arrived so far. The only thing the hero could occupy himself with was some rest. The quest log updated. 2 days out of 7 he survived. After talking to the hero, the officer learned that the guy's cell signal was coming from the office building at Garden Villa. He ordered a squad to be assembled and retrieve everything the kid had taken out of the bandits' lair. After some time to prepare, the squad raced in a van through the streets of the city. At the head of the squad was put a petty officer. When the car arrived at the place, he gave orders to the soldiers of the group. Sniper and machine gunners were to take positions, from which the radius of view would be as full as possible. The rest of the soldiers were divided into 2 teams and went in search of the enemy. The guys spread out. The sniper and machine gunners settled on the roof of one of the buildings nearby. The soldiers began to explore the area. Ran watched them from his hiding place. He appreciated how professionally the guys acted. The hero clicked the bolt on his weapon and thought that the rebels were indeed more serious enemies than the bandits. First of all, Ran decided to remove the sniper from his position. He posed a great danger to the guy. Because of the view that would be available to the soldier, any movement of Ran would be like a moving target. The hero looked through the scope at his target. The soldier didn't realize he was in such a vulnerable position. Ran took a deep breath to release the trigger on the exhale, aiming at the enemy. The shot was accurate, and instantly a notification popped up saying 100% damage to the enemy. The machine gunners noticed everything and were surprised by such a quick reaction of the enemy. If he destroyed the sniper, then their positions were revealed. The soldiers opened fire at the place where the shot was fired from. Ran hid behind a slope. Bullets flew off the walls along with stone chips. The senior was unhappy that the firing had started without his knowledge. He and the second group of soldiers were directly under the building the machine gunners were on, and there was a good chance of getting hit by a stray bullet. One of the soldiers told the chief the news that the sniper had been eliminated. It was hard to believe, because the man had not expected to be trapped on this mission. He assumed that their enemy had sniper skills and was lurking somewhere nearby. The man ordered the soldiers to get out of sight sooner rather than later. The machine gunners also wanted to change position and take cover from a possible attack. But Ran was one step ahead of them. When the soldiers stopped firing, the hero eliminated one machine gunner. The soldiers below saw what had happened to their comrade and opened fire from their hiding places. Ran barely managed to dodge the stream of bullets, but still one of them wounded him in the leg. The guy tore his clothes into tourniquets to dress the wound. He was lucky to have the opportunity to suddenly attack the enemy, and he was wounded after the third run. It was quick but expected. After all, these guys are trained better than bandits. Bandaging his wounded leg, Ran marveled once again at how realistic the feeling in this game was. His leg was not moving easily because of the wound, and he remembered that he hadn't gotten Maggie's knowledge in a hurry. It would come in handy now. Realizing that the soldiers would quickly find him, Ran decided to change location, one hand resting on the wall to lessen the strain on his wounded leg. A group of soldiers began searching the building across the street. Ran watched them through the scope of his rifle. The gunfire came as a surprise to the soldiers. Several were wounded by shards of glass. The senior ordered the squad to duck. Their opponent turned out to be no ordinary armed bandit. It was frustrating. The military officer speculated that their opponent might be a government spy, but that didn't fit with the situation in the city, which had been isolated and unsupported for a long time. Saluk believed that fighting for this city would only be a waste of time. The military shared his opinion. The man understood all the risks if the enemy really turned out to be a spy, but he wanted to survive, and to destroy the enemy was the direct order of the major. He ordered 2 guys to take sniper positions to attract the strangers' attention and to have a full view of the terrain, and the rest to stay alert and cover them. The soldiers were spreading out. They had an advantage over the enemy in numbers, so the officer hoped for a victory. Ran noticed that the soldiers' actions had changed. Some of them stopped hiding. It was like a trap. The best strategy to discover the snapper's location: give him a decoy. The hero saw the decoy well, but he didn't see the hunter anywhere. Ran watched the 2 soldiers who had decided to take the position of the previous snappers. The men were climbing up the ladder. The boy decided to take action. This point was the only place that really confined Ran. He couldn't allow this turn of events and fired. One of the soldiers was unlucky. He didn't make it to the roof in time. The bullet hit him squarely in the head. The officer instantly identified the location from which the shot had been fired. He ordered his subordinate, who remained close to him, to open fire on the enemy. The hero barely managed to dodge the bullets. He knew this was what would happen when he fired on the snipers on the roof. Ran watched the sniper he shot fall down the stairs. The other soldier seeks cover. A decision had to be made as quickly as possible. If the man got to the previous sniper's position, he would easily shoot Ran. He needed to get as far away from his previous position as possible, as it was exposed and covered by return fire, but there was not enough time. He needed to act now, or it would be too late. Ran glided to the target and pulled the trigger. The bullet hit the target and the defeated soldier slumped on the cold concrete of the roof. The flash and the sound of the shot revealed the guy's new position, and it was instantly covered with heavy machine gun fire. The bullets riddled the facade of the building. They penetrated the wall behind which the hero was hiding. It was impossible to duck from such a dense fire. Several bullets hit the guy. If it wasn't for the body armor he was wearing, he would have died instantly. Near Ran popped up a notification window, which reported on the damage received. The guy's health dropped to 55 points. The hero needed to take shelter in a safe place to regain his strength, as he had lost a lot of blood along the way. Despite the fact that the hero was wearing body armor, the bullets from the enemy's weapons were too powerful and Ran's injury was serious. The hero was unable to fully utilize his skills. However, he assumed that he could be seriously wounded and prepared himself in advance. In a cave nearby, Ran had hidden some supplies. Ran hoped that the rules in this game were the same as in any other game, so food would help the character recover from damage faster. With that thought, the boy opened the canned food. In the silence of the cave, chugging sounds could be heard, and a health recovery window appeared in front of the character's eyes. This was encouraging, especially when you consider the fact that soldiers could come to the shelter at any moment. The hero lost a lot of blood due to his severe injury, some of it dripping onto the ground as Ran walked to his hiding place. The soldiers were puzzled by their enemies' abilities, but they were quickly on the hero's trail. The petty officer was angry. His subordinates were discussing how capable the guy was. They completely forgot about their main mission, to deliver the jewelry to the headquarters. Destroying the boy was not their mission. When Ran finished his supplies, his health increased to 80%. The wounds he received in the firefight no longer caused negative effects. The food restored his health by 25 points within a minute, and he regained the confidence he had grown accustomed to over the past few days. At the same moment, voices were heard behind the boulders. The soldiers found the place where the trail of burls had broken off. They were afraid to go inside the cave, knowing how dangerous their adversary was. It could get them in big trouble, so they tried to lure him out. The men promised to spare his life if Ran came out of the cave of his own accord. But the answer to their words was a shot that killed one of them. The soldiers started to fight back. Their chief called a machine gunner on the radio. He rudely ordered the man to join them at the cave. After a while he got confirmation, and the senior man joined his men. At this time Ran was hiding from the enemy's bullets and pondered. He was now fighting elite rebel soldiers, so he could get good bonuses for destroying them. The older man was distracted by a voice from behind, a machine gunner announcing his approach. The man immediately gave him orders to cover them as they stormed the cave. While the machine gunner was preparing, the senior and several other soldiers went on the attack. At that moment, a grin appeared in the machine gunner's eyes. The man opened fire on his own men, killing everyone near the cave. The older man was shocked by what happened. He couldn't believe the betrayal of one of his men. The machine gunner only said goodbye to his former captain. The man's eyes were mad. Moving farther away from the battle site, Ran watched what was happening at his former hideout. He was surprised when one of the soldiers opened fire on his comrades. To get a better look at what was going on, the boy used his scope. But when the hero brought the sight to his eyes, there was no one in the machine gunner's place. This fact did not please the guy. A soldier who moves so fast could be more dangerous than the captain. Ran tried to change his position as quickly as possible. On the way he thought about how this could happen. This man had fooled not only his captain. Without stopping, the boy overcame obstacle after obstacle, but the misgiving did not leave him. At some point, a click sounded behind Ran's back. The stranger pointed a loaded gun at him and asked if the hero wanted to talk a little. Tension coursed through Ran's body, but he knew he had to act. Gathering himself, he discreetly placed his hand on the gun. He turned 180 degrees and fired at the enemy, hoping that the element of surprise would give him an advantage. But to his surprise, all the bullets hit the decoy, which was made of a t-shirt attached to a stick in the place where the stranger had spoken from. Ran realized that he had been outplayed once again. His opponent was once again a move ahead. This was at least alarming to the hero, and maybe it was starting to scare him. Goosebumps of terror crawled up his back as the stranger's voice came from behind him. The man stood behind the boy, grinning. The soldier had a gun in his hand. Ran swore, shocked that he was about to die like this, not even finishing the first dungeon. The guy had risked everything to make money in this forbidden game, and it couldn't end for him now. Ran decided to use the grenade. He hoped it would help him if not destroy the enemy. then at least buy some time for the next action. In the meantime, the stranger decided to explain the situation to the guy. He said that he was not going to harm the hero. As proof of his words, the man cited a situation where he could have silently killed the guy, but didn't do so. Ran was surprised. His opponent could really shoot him with one shot. Maybe he doesn't do it because of the jewelry. The hero decided to talk to the man. Without turning around, Ran asked if the stranger was really kind enough to let him go. The man confirmed that he would fulfill the guy's conditions he had set for Hook if he got the jewels. Ran exhaled. He really isn't going to be killed now. To find the jewels, the guy needs this soldier alive. The man tried to rub his way into the hero's confidence. He was General Jennings' man. The soldier assured Rana that the guy wouldn't go wrong if he trusted him. However, hearing the title of the new protagonist of this game gave Ran pause for thought. He didn't expect to take down someone bigger than Major Saluka. That would greatly increase the player's ranking. Now the guy had a chance to make a bigger score. Meanwhile, the man noticed that Ran was thinking about something. He decided to hurry the guy, because the general is the leader of the rebels and does not like to wait long. The hero said that he needed help because of the wound he received during the firefight. The soldier smiled. He decided to show a magnanimous gesture and give the guy first aid. However, first Ran had to get rid of his gun. The man asked the hero to put the gun on the ground and turn around to face him. Ran hid the grenade he had previously retrieved from his backpack in his pants pocket. He slowly placed the weapon down in front of him. Then the guy turned around to face his opponent. The man looked at the guy carefully. The wound was minor. The soldier noted that it would only take a little time for Ran to heal. But he offered to use his first aid kit and tossed the bag to the hero. Ran caught the first aid kit. When he opened it, an information window appeared in front of the guy with the names of the contents in the bag. Just as the soldier had said, there were a few gauze bandages and some medicine. Ran focused his attention on the contents of the jars. They contained an analgesic that blocked the feeling of pain for 3 minutes. The soldier recommended that the guy get an injection. He also added that if the hero told where he hid the jewelry, he would be able to receive a higher level of treatment and recover in the shortest possible time. All this the man said without taking the muzzle of the gun off the guy. Ran took one of the vials to give himself an injection. The player acted as if he agreed to do whatever the man wanted. Ran then pretended like he needed to put the empty vial in his backpack. In fact, it was a trick. The guy pulled the pin of the grenades that were left in the backpack. The next moment he threw his backpack at the soldier. The man didn't expect this from the guy and was surprised by the way he acted. The soldier immediately opened fire on the enemy. He thought the backpack was a deceptive maneuver to get out of sight. Ran tried to dodge the bullets, but it was all in vain. The soldier fired non-stop. The information window informed the guy that he had taken moderate damage. The enemy had inflicted 40 points of damage on Ran. The guy's legs were disabled. Only thanks to the medication that the hero took he felt no pain for 3 minutes. Ran fell to the ground. He was glad that he had thought of taking an analgesic, otherwise the guy would not have had the strength to do anything. At this time, the soldier was furious. He swore at the hero and thought that the guy missed an opportunity that not everyone in this city gets. Ran's backpack fell near the man. He was distracted by a noise. The scraping of metal against stone. The soldier looked back and saw a grenade fall out of the backpack. This dumbfounded the man. He thought the guy was only armed with the one he had placed on the ground. The man did not expect a grenade to be in the player's backpack. There was an explosion. Ran sat behind a boulder, covering his head with his hands and covering his ears. The explosion from the grenade did 150 points of damage. This was taking into account the fact that the game characters and the hero himself only had 100 health points. Another information window popped up in front of Ran. This time the game managed to surprise the guy. His firearm skills increased to beginner level. Strength increased to F plus constitution increased to F plus the hero's health was now not 100, but 120 points. The smoke from the explosion cleared. An interesting thing in the shape of a book was lying near the soldier. It was shimmering and attracting attention. Ran thought it was the soldier's skill book and decided to take a closer look at the thing. When the player picked up the book, a window appeared asking if he wanted to explore the contents of the book. Of course, Ran wanted to learn more and get new skills. The guy was flooded with information. He got the skill of tracking the target on the tracks. Major Saliak's camp was restless. The man was very angry. The mission the major had entrusted to his loyal soldiers had failed. The cunning boy had deceived the experienced soldiers. Ran called Saluk. He reported that the squad was killed by their own comrade. Now the boy was going to cooperate with someone above Saluk. The man was sure that all of this happened under the control of General Jennings. Only this old man could be fearless enough to cross Saluk. Jennings has long wanted to eliminate the major, and now he intends to put his plans into action. The major reprimanded himself. Not only had the general appropriated the priceless treasures that should have gone to Saluka, he had promised the kid to get rid of the major. Saliuke could not allow such insolence. The man left the building. He decided to summon his soldiers. Saluka came up with a cunning plan that could disrupt the general's plans. Meanwhile, Rand stood at the scene of the recent firefight. The guy was holding a Scorpion M2 in his hands. The hero was ready to continue his mission in this game. It had only been 2.5 days here, but the guy felt like a different person. He assumed it was the game's effect on his brain. Ran looked at his parameters in the game. He had made tangible progress in that time. However, it wasn't enough. Ran knew that he could get even more and play to the best of his ability. After all, the boy had put his life on the line for this game. Jennings' camp was bustling with activity. Soldiers were gathering in squads and spreading out around the perimeter of the camp. Saluki's sniper had chosen a good spot for an ambush. Sitting comfortably on the roof of a building, he watched the soldiers through his scope. The man didn't hear them sneaking up behind him. Ran was quick and silent. He silently neutralized the enemy. Taking the sniper's position, the hero surveyed the perimeter. Ran's plan was for his enemies to kill each other. It was for this purpose that the guy shared his thoughts with the major. The man had already approached his comrade's camp. Yes, and Jennings' soldiers were already ready to meet the major. The general was informed that Saluka had indeed come to the camp with an armed detachment. The man was surprised that the major was so bold. They stood on opposite sides of the barbed wire fence. Around both of them was an entourage of loyal soldiers, ready to attack the enemy at any moment. Saluka demanded justice from the general. However, Jennings had no time to answer or say anything. He was hit in the head by a bullet. Everyone present, including Saluka himself, was dumbfounded. The next moment, another bullet hit the major as well. Soldiers on both sides began to whisper. The commanders had been eliminated. The soldiers were confused. They did not know who had eliminated their leaders and how. The best solution was to blame the other side. The general's men claimed that it was Saluk's soldiers who killed their leader. The soldiers who came with the major were outraged because only an enemy sniper could have killed Saliak. The situation was heating up. The first to lose their nerve were Jennings' subordinates, and they opened fire on the guests. They wanted to avenge their general. Saluk's soldiers decided to counterattack. They chose a good place from which it was convenient not only to negotiate, but also to fight. A firefight began. The squads fired bullets at each other. Ran watched the situation below carefully. He liked the way the plot of the game was developing. The guy hoped to take the lead in the ranking of those who had passed this level. In front of the player appeared an information window with the results of progress. For the elimination of the major, the period of stay in the game was reduced by 1 day. For the elimination of a general, the period of stay in the game was reduced by 3 days. The objectives of the game changed. The hero had to survive for 3 days. 2 days out of 3 days had passed. Ran was surprised. He did not expect that the conditions of the game would change so drastically. The player's plan was to destroy as many elite soldiers as possible in order to collect their weapons and sell them at the auction. While the guy was thinking about it, he was spotted by a passing bystander. The man tried to climb onto the roof where Ran had set up. The guy heard a noise behind him. The soldier realized that he couldn't get close to the stranger silently. Ran shot the soldier without a moment's hesitation. He didn't want the man to make a fuss. However, the soldier's body flew down. The people gathered below immediately realized that the sniper who had killed the general was sitting up there. The men decided to hurry up and catch him. One of the soldiers fired a javelin ATGM at the building. The shot hit the exact spot where Ran was. The guy managed to react and bounce away from the explosion. Jumping down, the hero threw a grenade at the group below. He needed to clear the way. There was an explosion. The men were stunned and scattered. A tank approached the building. The military decided to attack the sniper with heavy equipment. Ran hadn't expected such a turn of events. He didn't stop for a minute to survive. The soldiers in the camp raised a ruckus. They saw that the sniper was alive and trying to escape. The player had to go to extreme lengths to survive. He was sorry to part with the grenades under these conditions. Still, Ran expected to sell as much loot as possible to make money, but there was no choice now. He unlocked the safety of the grenades and threw his backpack into the crowd. Behind the boy's back, an explosion of incredible force rang out. This was Ran's chance for a successful escape from Jennings' camp. While Ran dealt with the enemies outside, Colin and Maggie were in the shelter. The girls heard explosions, the sound of which echoed throughout the city. Maggie was very worried about the hero. Colleen hugged her friend tightly and tried to calm her down. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. The girls were even more frightened. Colleen plucked up courage to see who was trying to get in. Rand's voice sounded behind the door. The brunette laughed to open the door. The boy came back into the shelter. He was covered in bruises and abrasions. Colleen hurried Maggie over to give the player first aid. The blonde was dressing the hero's wounds. Ran requested that the girl teach him the skill. Maggie was not against it. A window with information about the new useful skill popped up in front of the hero. Basic knowledge in medicine was now available to Ran. Colleen began to question her friend about what was happening to him upstairs. Ran wasn't hiding anything from his friends. He believed that this night would completely change the course of the confrontation with the rebels, and soon, order would be restored in the city again thanks to the forces of the government. Colleen was surprised that her friend was the cause of such a grand change in the life of the city. Suddenly, red-colored information windows appeared in front of Ran. It said that the player would be leaving the level in 5 minutes. He had to hurry to gather all the items that could be taken out of the level with him. If the limit was exceeded, the items would be considered ones that couldn't be taken out. The boy was puzzled. He had collected a lot of cool loot over the course of the game, and all of his loot would definitely not fit within the allotted limit. Ran began to quickly pack his backpack. He took with him a sniper rifle, 2 rocket launchers, a pistol, and grenades. As he put these in his backpack, the guy thought about the fact that he didn't know what his item limit was. Colleen approached the player. The girl noticed that the friend had started packing. She asked if Ran was going to keep them. The player looked at his friend carefully. Even though she was a simple NPC, but she became a real friend for the guy without whom it would be extremely difficult to survive here. Their parting was inevitable. Ran sincerely thanked the girl for her help and said goodbye. At that moment, he began to be carried out of the shelter. The sensation was strange. It was the same feeling he had experienced when he first immersed himself in the dungeon. Ran felt a solid surface beneath his feet. The boy looked around carefully. This was strange. Game Hall was different from the one he remembered. Ran speculated that the creators of the game might have redesigned the user's office. Suddenly there were loud noises. This shocked the hero. Ran drew his pistol to be able to defend himself in case of an attack. A notification appeared in front of the hero that Steam City and Iron Tank guilds had engaged in a confrontation. Players were asked not to leave their personal offices to avoid trouble. The information impressed the guy. He didn't think he would see such a showdown in a game of this magnitude. Then, Ran looked at the report on passing the beginner dungeon. The hero handled all of the level's tasks perfectly. He completed the main objective in 3 days. The side task of rescuing civilians was completed at 200% because Ran saved 2 NPCs, got special marks for destroying rebel leaders. Hero earned 3,000 points, 3 skill points and 1 gold skill point. Beginner dungeon final eval. Ran was ecstatic. His stats were much better than any beginner player. The guy decided that if he did as well in every dungeon, he could quickly become the strongest player, and thus collect the money he needed faster. Next, new windows with information appeared in front of the guy. In one he was offered to go to the forum, open a store or dungeon channel. In others there was a description of opportunities in this or that place, which the player would choose to go to. It was the red boxes that caught Ran's attention. The first note warned that single-player dungeon, cooldown time 1 week after each entry. The second said multiplayer dungeon, at least 2 people, cooldown time 1 month after each entry. The third one said that it was necessary to enter the dungeon every 3 months, otherwise the player would lose all his skills and achievements, and the character would be considered dead. The last entry made Ran wonder. Did it say that the character would be dead in the game, or would a similar thing await him in real life? The guy knew that the game was banned precisely because many people who played it died. The hero had more questions than answers to them. That's why Ran decided to look around in the menu. The guy was prompted to enter his nickname, since it was his first time entering the chat room. Ran decided that thinking about the meaning of the words in the notes was useless right now. He didn't have enough money to pay his hospital bill. Therefore, the right thing to do would be to visit the game's forum and store. Ran took a set of numbers 2567 as his nickname. He liked to play on this platform. The hero wanted to increase his skill level. He was greatly surprised to realize that the 3,000 points he had earned for completing the initial level of the game were actually insignificant. In order to increase his firearm skill by +1, he needed to spend 1,500 points. Ran spent all of his points to pump this skill up to proficiency. The guy started thinking about what he could sell at a higher profit to get more points. The pistol on the forum was valued at 1,000 points. At the same time, rocket launchers were worth more. Ran had 2 of them. The hero chose the sell option. A trading table appeared in front of him, indicating that the player should put on its surface what he wants to sell. Ran entered his wishes for the value of the game attribute into the dialog box. He valued his loot at 10,000 points and 5 skill points. Instantly, information about the lot appeared. Users began to actively discuss the novelty. Some players thought that the cost of rocket launchers is overestimated and offered their own price. One player even offered Ran an invitation to the guild for such a lot. The hero was impressed by how quickly his item became popular. The highest price was offered by a player with the nickname Lawless. The player offered 6,000 points and 3 skill points for the item. Ran thought about it. His lot was really interesting to a lot of people. It seemed to him that there was someone on the forum strongly interested in buying it. The next moment, Lawless sent a friendship request to Ran's private messages. The hero grinned. This player was proving to be really impatient. Ran thought that this guy probably needed to solve some problems right away. Ran started a correspondence with Lawless. He, as well as the other players, thought that the price Ran had set was overpriced. Lawless explained his position because one system could only fire one missile at a time. And if it didn't hit the target once, another rocket launcher would be needed. Besides, one rocket launcher costs 500 points in the store. Ran thought for a moment. Suddenly, there was a notification that the item was sold for 10,000 points and 5 skill points. The hero was happy with the outcome of the transaction. He thought that he would get much less than that. Lawless was shocked. Members of the same guild had knocked down his price. Ran grinned. He texted his new friend that he had more for sale. Lawless was surprised. He even wondered if Ran had robbed the armory. The player asked to see everything Ran had and promised to offer a fair price for everything. Ran raised the price on the next rocket launcher. The player offered Ran a single-player dungeon acceleration cooling card, 2,000 points, and 1 skill point. Ran looked up the information on the single-player dungeon acceleration cooling card. It allowed him to freeze time. Ran was impressed. Time is really a resource that will be important to the hero. With extra time, Ran would be able to get stronger, get more ammunition and convert it into real money. Ran raised the number of points a bit besides the card. Lawless raised the cost to 4,000 points and 2 skill points. The hero looked at how many points he had earned. His information window showed that Ran had 17,000 points, 10 skill points, and 1 gold skill point. Ran opened the attribute panel to upgrade his skills. He was happy that he was able to upgrade unarmed combat to effect B. Ran was now able to fight using only his legs at a professional level. He also upgraded his other skills to proficient. They were firearm, tracking, cold weapon, evade, stealth, medical bandaging and medical knowledge. Ran felt great. He was glad that he had improved so many of his skills. He felt a rush of strength and new knowledge. An information window appeared in front of the hero with a proposal to move to the next level of the game. Ran was surprised that the FOMO dungeon task became available so quickly. Here we are at the end of this arc. That was awesome. Thanks for your likes, subscriptions, and comments. It really motivates me to make new videos for you. As soon as the video gets 1,000 likes, I will start making a new one. Have a good day. Didn't even get to browse.